Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank, Rainer. Und wir gehen dann wieder über ins Englische. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
Uwe, good to see you. Thank you for including me.
As we've heard,
program.
Well, thank you. As we've heard in the intro, you're very sad that your president didn't win re-election, correct?
This was the best news for America in a long time. We got rid of that person. God, he was a disaster. And now we're on to something much, much better, something promising. So this is actually very good news. President Biden is an extremely decent man, and he's doing a very good job. So I feel a lot better than I did a few months ago.
And it's good news for America. Is it also good news for the world's climate?
You could see from today, this very day, President Biden is hosting a leaders summit, 40 world leaders, the Secretary General of the UN. They're making actually quite important statements. Even Bolsonaro of Brazil said how important climate safety was. You know, he was singing a completely different tune when Trump was president, but he committed to a climate safe policy. President Putin said how important this agenda is for global cooperation. President Xi Jinping said that coal will be phased out during this decade. I don't think he said phased out to zero, but starting to phase it out in 2025, I think is what I saw in the news service. The United States announced a cut of 50% of greenhouse gases by 2030. I haven't seen the plan for that yet. That's relative to 2005 baseline. But again, a real objective with a real timeline on the path to net zero by 2050. Something good is happening right now because we've reached, the end of the story where we have to act. But I think we're seeing a tipping point politically in the right direction.
Jeff, we used to have the former Chancellor Helmut Schmidt as our publisher, late Helmut Schmidt, who in Germany was called the world economist. Of course, the other world economist is you. And so we're turning to you at the end of this day, this day of very exciting discussions about climate questions and related questions for optimism in a way. I would like to talk to you about how the world can actually manage to take the turn in time. And I know you've thought about this a lot. You've worked a lot with the UN on global climate questions. So maybe you can lead us onto the path. What's necessary, especially now, during the next couple of years, for this to really happen?
Thanks, Uwe. I think you said my favorite word in this, which is path. What I use the word pathway, the pathway to 2050. I don't want to hear just promises about what we're going to do. I want to see what is the path, step by step, year by year, to actually get to net zero. The good news is that technology has really advanced tremendously. Germany was in the forefront of driving down the costs of photovoltaics, for example. And between Germany as the marketplace and user and China as the producer of solar cells, the costs came down by 2 orders of magnitude, and they continue to fall. So we now have the basic pathway pretty clear, which is zero carbon electricity, electrification of vehicles, electrification of the buildings, both for heating and cooking, and electrification of industry or green fuels for industry produced with clean electricity. This is the basic mix. I would add one more component to that, and that is energy efficiency coming from a smart grid. So digital grid that supports a zero carbon power generation in an economy that is largely electrified. That's the basic strategy. I've reviewed by now dozens or hundreds of pathways of countries in different parts of the world, they all come down to the same basic point. And so each country has to ask the question, where are we going to get our clean electricity from? Because in Germany, it may be wind power in the North Sea. In Chad, it will be sunshine in the Sahel. And the question then for each country is, what is our mix of clean electricity? But I would say that in 20 years, we're going to be driving or riding in, because maybe there won't be a driver, the same electric vehicles. Germany is going to be producing a lot of them, no doubt. I count on Germany being the best producers of electric vehicles, as Germany has been the best producers of internal combustion engine vehicles for the last century. So I think that this is an important area for transformation. Every plan I know comes to basically the same story. And then the debate has been among the technologists, can this really be done? You know, the pessimists say, well, wind and solar is all fine, but it's intermittent. You can't store it. It's expensive. The grid won't operate. But even there, the battery storage has become so much less expensive, so much more technically able to back even grid scale, that these kinds of doubts are evaporating. And what I see is more and more of a clear shot and more private capital getting behind these large bets now. You look at Tesla, you know, Elon Musk's electric vehicle, it became the most valued company in the automotive sector in the world, because money is moving in that direction and getting out of the fossil fuels pretty quickly. It's, of course, not simple in any sense. Technologically, there still are lots of puzzles, no doubt. I'm not an engineer, but I talk to engineers all the time. Politically, just like Germany had a really tough challenge with the lignite-producing regions, and it took the Coal Commission to negotiate a 20-year scenario for phase-out. Well, all over the world, there are still powerful regions of the fossil fuel sector, whether it's oil, gas, or coal. They want their say, they want their transfers, they want their jobs in this generation. There's a lot of politics ahead, but there's not the profound mystery. Can we do it? Will it break the bank? Will it destroy the economy? There, I think that we've really reached a pretty strong consensus, actually.
There's obviously a lot of innovation waiting to happen, and thus there's also going to be a certain kind of green growth. On the other hand, there are certain things that have to be done away with, either by law or just because they're not profitable anymore. There has to be a carbon price, a carbon tax that's really useful and high enough. All in all, will this be an environment of growth and of growing wealth and welfare for normal people?
In general, I think our lives certainly can get better in the coming decades, because the transformation itself is not really that costly comparing, say, photovoltaics with a coal plant. They're basically at parity at this point. And because the continuing digital age is going to create many advances for living conditions, just for quality of life in general. So I believe that the years and decades ahead don't have to be years of anguish that, my God, we're bearing an unbearable cost, but actually will be years of further development. I have to say that the way we measure economies now is just getting so bad, because so much about the real quality of life is not captured in the national income accounts anymore, that whether we'll have rises or falls of income or income stagnation and so forth, I don't know what the data are going to show exactly, but what the real life can be is improvements in the quality of life. One part of that, I believe, Germany is, by the way, a front runner in this, is lower working time. Germans work a lot less than Americans, by the way, per year. You have a lot longer. Pardon me?
Except for me.
Well, yeah, you should check in with your bosses about that. But Germans have good long summer vacations. The work hours have been cut. I'm in favor of this as the long-term path because I think we want to do things with our lives that are enriching. Leisure, I think, is a good thing. Continuing adult education and new forms of education, especially with online. And the reason I say all of this is that our jobs are going to change a lot in the future. And we may end up lower working time, and it could look like, oh, output is stagnant, but the quality of the day could be much higher. In the last year during the pandemic, a lot of people worked from home and they stopped the 1 hour each way commute, for example. And for many people, that was an improvement to the quality of life in this, but it could show up in the national accounts as a negative. So I just want to distinguish between what we measure and what we actually achieve. But one other basic point is in our societies, because not only of climate change, but because of technological change more generally, there are always shifts of income distribution by region or by occupation that could be very significant. And that's why we need a social market ethos or a social democratic ethos to make sure that no one is falling through the bottom when these transformations occur. We're rich enough to make sure that everybody can share in the benefits. In the US, we haven't had that philosophy for a long time, but Biden is bringing it back in.
You've already said that the ecological turn also means a digital turn, a sort of a wave of digital reform and digitization of lots of infrastructures and so on. At the moment, digitization doesn't have the best rep in Europe due to the discussions about the major platforms, the Googles and Facebooks of this world, and the question of data privacy and other related questions. How can we sort of save the rep and of digitization and sort of get people's readiness to accept digitization as something for the common good and not for the common bad?
We haven't started global negotiations on these issues in a serious way, which is amazing because the digital revolution is 20 years at least very intensively. The cost to privacy have been very high. The fake news, the surveillance society is already upon us. The autonomous weaponry is already there, the cyber warfare. But where are the UN negotiations about digital safety? Where are the WTO negotiations? They don't exist yet. And I believe we need a framework to civilize this core technology. In the United States, it's left to a few private companies. I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg to turn around, but he's probably watching right now, or one of his AI systems is watching me right now, no doubt. But in China, it's state that does the surveillance. Europe has been in the lead of the GDPR, of giving digital privacy, but there's no global framework for this. And whenever you have a major technological change, whether it's civil aviation or whether it was nuclear weapons and nuclear power, we need a global framework. And this has to be, Europe has been in the lead on this because maybe because the companies aren't European also by and large. Europe doesn't like being looked at this way, you know, and wants the data to be protected. But I would put this on the agenda, and I hope the EU could push with China, with the United States, at a minimum the three regions, because this is where most of the tech is coming from right now, that we start to take this seriously rather than a free-for-all. In the US, this is viewed as already part of the military system. Almost all of our big tech companies have Pentagon contracts. It makes me extremely uneasy. In China, there are many, many questions that are being raised. And so I think we need to put this on the clear negotiating agenda. We know by experience this could take 5 years, could take longer, but the discussion itself will open up a very important set of issues. Also, we know digital taxation has not been settled yet, though thank goodness Biden is not blocking it the way that Trump was blocking it. So I agree with you. A huge disruptive technology always has downsides. And the idea is not to stop the technology, but to regulate it so that we get the benefits without the costs. And we haven't really started to do that. And because these companies are so powerful in the US politically, we're a bit stuck. So I would ask Europe, help save the world on this.
Well, at least one side we can help on. Jeffrey, on one hand, we talk about sort of big politics and policies and the macro framework for climate control. On the other hand, of course, there are the people, the individuals, the consumers, who are being told that they can do and have to do this and this and that. And of course, they are needed because they have to vote for climate control. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. What are the major ways in which we can get more people onto this bandwagon and convince that this is worth fighting for and worth voting for?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'd say there's good news in the US, which is not always to be taken for granted. And that is that the recent opinion surveys show basically 70% of Americans pretty solidly knowing that climate is a danger, knowing that we've got to move forward, wanting to be part of the Paris Agreement, wanting to invest in renewable energy. So even though we had Trump, who was the opposite of all of that, he was not reflecting half the country. He was reflecting a small proportion of the country that was in the Republican Party base, but not even, well, certainly if you add independents, no way this is a majority view. It's very much a minority view. So that's part of the good news. You know, because of powerful lobbyists in the US, especially big oil was the most powerful lobby for almost a century in the United States. We didn't get action even when the public wanted it. But it means that Biden won't face head-on opposition from the public when he has today's event with world leaders or he proposes decarbonization. And interestingly, during the final debates of Trump and Biden, Biden said, we need to get out of fossil fuels. And Trump said, say that again. And Biden reiterated, and Trump treated it as, well, you just, gave me the path to election, because he thought, therefore, he would carry Pennsylvania, for example, and other fossil fuel states where fracking was going on. But he lost them in the end. And I think it's a telling point that the politics isn't for preserving the old and the dangerous. Having said all of that, I think the other crucial point of our democracies is people need to be part of the deliberations, part of the discussions, part of the public understanding. And those of us who are advocating kinds of changes need to be very clear about the pathways. So I always insist, let's be as vivid as possible to explain what it is it means to have a transition to zero carbon, because it could sound very frightening. We're going to take away your cars. Many things could be said. So it's important to explain clearly, this is going to be a better life. This is no joke. It's not a game. We have to do it because it's dangerous to not do it, but it's actually not going to cripple the quality of life. You're going to have a better life, better vehicles, because electric vehicles and smart vehicles are better vehicles, because the air is going to be cleaner. We're going to live better.
Jeffrey, we've gone full circle in a little more than 20 minutes. I honestly don't think anybody else could have done it. So,
well, thanks to you for guiding us.
Thank you so much for being with us. And it was a pleasure. And thanks for this dose of realistic optimism.
Wonderful.
From New York.
Thank you. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.